Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. And today, we're being joined by Mike Hingson, New York Times bestselling author of Thunderdog. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Well, Mike, we are thrilled to have you. Are you ready to begin?
Absolutely.
All right. Question number one. What is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
I would say be flexible, but have a vision and try to stick to your vision. But, as you're starting to write, you may bring other things into it that will cause you to change your direction. There's nothing wrong with that. But you should have a vision of what you want your book to be, or what the purpose of your book is, and where you want it to go. Writing a book is a sales presentation by any standard. You want the public to read it. And so you've got to have something that people want to read and will be interested in reading. But you may change from the beginning to the end, especially if you haven't done it before.
And what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
I think the hardest part, especially for most people, is looking at how they're going to make the book available to people. You can get a book published by a publisher if you happen to be fortunate enough to do that, and we were with Thunderdog. Of course, my story is about being in the World Trade Center on September 11th, and we were pretty visible. And someone wanted to help with making the book available to people and writing the book. They had a literary agent, and we ended up talking to Chip McGregor about that whole process. And he said, I don't want a 9/11 book. And I said, good, I don't want one either. So we wrote part of it. We created a proposal and sent it to him. And he loved it, and within a week it was sold. Now, not everyone is going to be able to do that. Self-publishing is also a good way. But you have to look at your options, study your options, and whatever you do, even if you're self-publishing it, create a proposal, even if it's just for you, of what's going to be in the book, how you're going to market it. You have to decide how much marketing you're going to do, because especially if you self-publish it, you've got to be the marketer of it. And if you get a publisher to do it, you're still going to have to be one of the major marketers these days, if not the major marketer.
Well, this transitions perfectly into our next question, and that is to please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that has worked well.
Once the book was announced to the world, I started emailing to my whole list, and I started asking others to do the same thing. We put out Facebook posts, and as a public speaker, because I've been doing that since September 11th, I offered to come and speak to organizations and get hired to speak and also talk about Thunderdog, and we did, and I think that was pretty successful. I think the key is, and the most successful thing is, you've got to be heavily involved in marketing your own book. You've got to be the best salesperson. And even if a publisher does it, especially as I said earlier, in today's world, you have to be one of the major marketers. So you need to get very clear on what your book is about, what you want people to get out of it, and you have to work to get in front of people. The more of a list you have, or the more people you have access to on social media, or the more friends who you can get to help promote your book, the better. But you do have to be in charge of that and make it happen. And if you do all of that, you can be very successful.
So what is the main piece of advice that you would give for someone just starting out? They're not necessarily have a publisher, they're going to do it themselves, and they need to market the book. What is the main piece of advice you would give them?
I would say right from the outset, and while you're writing the book, figure out what outlets, what mechanisms you can use to promote it. And then when the book is written and you're happy with it, you've edited it, you've done all the work to make that book a success in your own mind, and you publish it on Amazon or wherever you publish it, be prepared immediately to pull the trigger and tell the world about your book.
Well, speaking of books, I'd like to know what is your favorite book and what was the number one thing that you learned from it.
Oh, you're going to get three here, 2 fiction and 1 nonfiction, but I'll go fast. The 2 fiction are The Moon is a Harsh Mistress by Robert Heinlein, and the other one is A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court by Mark Twain. The reason that they're my favorite books in the fiction world is that they demonstrated creativity, and it keeps reminding me every time I read them about how creative people can be with writing plots and writing things that maybe people hadn't thought of. But at the same time, I also find that those books tend to comment on society, and it's perhaps a fiction author's way of doing it rather than going out and giving speeches of political nature. Satire and other mechanisms that authors use, and especially the fiction world, are just as valid in terms of helping us think about things in our world that we might not otherwise think of. My nonfiction favorite book is Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman, Adventures of a Curious Fellow, which was written by Richard P. Feynman, probably the greatest physicist of the latter part of the 20th century. He talks right from the beginning about the fact that even with his father, he was urged to be curious. His father would take him out on outings, and they would see birds flying in a park, and his father would say, "So why do those birds fly?" And this is to a very young man. They're not supposed to. Why do they fly? And little Richard, later Dr. Feynman, had to go get the answers to those. And I think that it's important for us to always be curious. All too often, we tend to discourage curiosity in especially children. And so Dr. Feynman's book reminds me that in reality, curiosity can only enhance your life.
And for a final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
And I Am Prejudiced. It's a quote from Thunderdog, which goes, "Don't let your sight get in the way of your vision." Being blind, I'm oftentimes told by people what they think I can and can't do because they happen not to be blind. The biggest problem with blindness is that there are a lot of people who haven't tried it. And the reality is that they go by just what they see, and as a result, their imagination and their curiosity, again, often get limited. And so don't let your sight get in the way of your vision is my way of saying to people, don't just go by what you see with your eyes. Look at the rest of the world. Listen and use all of your senses, and open your mind to imagination and imaginative concepts. And most of all, don't worry about, and just encourage yourself to be creative and curious in everything you do.
Mike, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you online?
People can go to www.michaelhingson.com. That's www.michaelhingson.com.
Mike, thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thank you. My pleasure. It was good to be here.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how to get your book published with a proven system that works, grab a free copy of my book at getpublishedpodcast.com.